Hey all, hope you're doing well. It's gosh, this is not a topic that is very exciting for most people. I think you have to have a situation where you see that frequent eye blinking is bothering somebody, and that's somebody in my situation. I've seen it in news reporters. I've seen it in a variety of kids, and including my own. So that's why this subject is a bit dear to my heart, and it's always a struggle to see people struggling. So I'm going to pop out the questions here so I see them. Perfect. All right. So any questions that you guys have, feel free to ask them in the same question box here because I want to honor your time and I appreciate you being here and listening and learning because I can do all the research I want, but it's actually you who comes out and implements them and brings it to the clinic. So that's what we need. So I appreciate your support and bringing it to the clinic and helping people out. So frequent eye blinking, the standard disclaimers and disclosures. Some of the stuff I'm bringing up is theoretical, but there are various mechanisms that are definitely proven with excitation, and I'm going to be hitting those. So one of the reasons why I want to bring this topic up is because if you go to a standard doctor or you're trying to learn about this, there's basically no information. You're kind of guessing, which is kind of what we're doing today. But we're guessing with utilizing the pathway planners and the mechanisms that we know of, and we're putting it all together, and it makes a lot more sense than what the standard treatments are out there. So why is it important? We touched on this just briefly, but a lot of kids are struggling with this. I once saw a person being interviewed on the news, and he was some expert for something. I don't remember what, but that guy was blinking nonstop. He didn't seem stressed out. He seemed fine. His tone was all right. His cadence was good. His hand gestures were fine. He didn't appear to be sweating, but he was constantly blinking and blinking ferociously. So that definitely caught my eye, and the interviewer was also kind of put off a bit. So it was unfortunate. So this is a paper that I read here, Evaluation of Excessive Blinking in Childhood. It's one of many that I read, and this paper brought some good things to light, but it also left still major holes. And as you can see here, majority of kids in school, it causes them to feel bad about themselves. I mean, how wouldn't it? Kids are going to be making fun of someone else blinking constantly. So little kids are they don't give back. I mean, they just or hold back. They just keep going. And so we need to figure out this situation here. I mean, there's little guidance on how to evaluate and manage children with excessive blinking. So we're trying to turn the tide on that right now. And keep going in this review article, and they talked about that the one of the most common situations for blinking is basically mental. I mean, these guys are and kids are just blinking incessantly due to some mental issue that is not really clear. And well, adjustment to a new environment is part of it. But after 3 months, it went away in almost 70% of the cases. So if you do nothing, it can go away, but it takes 3 months. So if you kid or you knew someone who had a blinking problem and it lasted 3 months, that's not a good situation. If somebody had an open wound on their skin and it lasted 3 months to heal, or if it was a big eczema rash, 3 months is a long time, and there's social issues with that. So they're saying it's self-limited, typically benign. It is, but in the social world, it is not benign. And if you read this article here, they talk about most of the kids with frequent eye blinking, it's transient. That's fine. But, a big but, is tics become more severe with a longer duration of symptoms and may have influenced the symptoms and the patient's level of attention. So if you do nothing, it can go away. But if you do nothing, it can get worse. And as you do nothing, the blinking is such a distraction because, I mean, they're blinking. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's very fast, and it's got to be interrupting them. So the treatment, and well, this is our last slide, because Botox is the answer. I mean, of course, just go to your local Botox specialist, and we'll inject the hell out of your eye, and we'll try not to inject your eye itself. And Botox is safe, and we'll just make the skin so tight around your eye that you actually can't even blink. So that's a great solution. That one blew my mind. So that's why we're discussing it, because Botox is not the answer. And if you read about various areas on the internet, you get articles like this. And this article, they actually have some decent information here. They talk about allergies and infections and stress and tension, environmental objects as well, such as smoke and dust and pollen. I think that's very applicable, but that's pretty easy. But there's the psychogenic issue that is going undetected. Or I shouldn't say undetected, it's detected, but it's not dealt with. So first, if we need to figure out, all right, frequent eye blinking, the gross change of what appears normal to people blinking constantly, that's easy to diagnose. But what is it normally? So 1 to 4 times in a neonate, 1 to 4 times blinks per minute in a neonate. That's amazing. That's amazing. So I had no idea it was that slow. And then 10 to 12 starts from adolescence and then the rest of your life. That's kind of your rate. So if you find you're blinking more than that, then there could be some issues. And it does increase during conversation. So my frequency of blinking right now might be increased. And I'm not sure why that is. Possibly because I'm using more neurotransmitters and I'm thinking more. But reading is also stimulating, but possibly not as stimulating as conversation. So what are some of the causes? And I put some of the causes here. I don't have all the answers. I never will have all the answers, but we want to get some of the known causes right off the bat. Some of these known causes, obviously, dry eyes. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Somebody has contacts also. Contacts can be a big problem. I did not put that on here, but dry eyes, vitamin A, essential fatty acids. I really, really strongly recommend, if you haven't ordered the red blood cell fatty acid test in the past, to do so. So it's called RBC fatty acids. That's a very important test to look at. I think a lot of people are also overdosing on fish oil and taking too much. Some people think the more the better, but that's not the case. So I've seen when I was over in Japan, people's EFAs were way off the chart. In fact, too high according to the test, but their omega-6s were way too low. So essential fatty acids, I didn't specify, but they just need to be balanced. Allergens, it can be food or environmental, obviously. There's a great book by Doris Rapp. That's Doris Rapp. And it's basically, she talks about kids and common symptoms. Let me see if I can get the name for you. I'm going to write it down. Yeah, Is This Your Child? It's a very good book. Let me show it to you here. I have 2 monitors, so I'm bringing it over right now. So this book, this is a fantastic book. Look at that. I bought it March 29th, 2007. And Doris Rapp is an environmental medicine specialist. She's in her 80s. She's phenomenally brilliant. And there's some great pictures in the book too that talks about how the environment can affect certain areas of the child. And it's not limited to just children. It talks about children, but obviously you can apply it to an adult too. So stress increases frequent eye blinking. Habit, they say habit is causing it, but I say what's causing the habit? I think habit is a lame cause. It's not that cut and dry. And then inflammation, blepharitis of the inflammation of the eyelid, styes. It could possibly be irritating, and obviously if you get some type of something in your eye, like an eyelash or some dust or something. Common diagnoses: habitual tics. That's actually the most common, but that's not useful. It's not useful at all. I mean, why do you have the habitual tic? It's it's basically stupid. And then a mental cause of you spasming your eyelids. So what's causing you to clamp your eyelids shut frequently, or have high frequency of blinking? And then inflammation of the eyelid. Those are the pretty much common diagnoses. But again, it's a diagnosis. If you keep doing it, they're not going to know what to do about it. If they do try something, it's not going to be useful. It's just going to be suppressive or palliative, unless it's dry eyes or something to clean the eye. Then obviously that will help. Relationships. Now this is where it starts getting a bit more useful. I threw this slide in because you start looking at relationships and it starts making more sense, especially since we like to think mechanistically, right? We always try to think of where in the pathway is being blocked and disturbing my patient. So seizure disorders is very common in people who have frequent eye blinking. Stress and anxiety, it's already talked about, and allergies we've already talked about. But when you work with this patient population and you see these things, do pay attention to their eyes and don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. If they're frequent eye blinking, definitely note that. Are they blinking more than 10 to 12 times a minute if they're a child and above, and 1 to 4 if they're a neonate? So I would definitely be noting that, because I think if you look at a patient and you are noting that their eye blinking rate is faster than 10 to 12 times a minute, and obviously be approximate, then you could be suspecting some of the things I'm going to be talking about here. So let's get right to the mechanisms, because this is where it gets fun. And this is where we need to be focusing. So obviously, we have to know what is contributing to the brain's function and the brain's dysfunction, because what's actually controlling the eye? What's controlling the eye is the brain, and what's controlling the brain? Genetics and the environment and the mindset and nutritional things and chemicals and radiation, oxidation of the patient, and processed foods and inflammation and pathogens. All these things are contributing to epigenetic variation of the genes. And as they vary, you're going to get some genetic instability or altered expression. And with that, you're going to get altered frequency of eye blinking in this situation. So we need to be looking at the brain and the mechanisms within the brain and whatever else, such as here, is contributing to that disruption. So we know that we have genes, and we know that things come in to feed the gene, the building product, the substrate, and we know that the genes spit out an end product, and we know that these genes are also affected by things which decrease or increase their activity. And then there's a key to make that enzyme work and that gene work, which is a cofactor, minerals and nutrients. So, or minerals and vitamins. So if these cofactors are deficient, then we have a problem. And if we have a substrate deficiency, we have a problem. We have an end product excess, which could feedback inhibit the enzyme. That could also be a problem. And then we have environmental compounds, which can decrease the activity. We have compounds that are produced in the body endogenously, which can also increase or decrease the activity, along with pathogens. So I want to focus on glutamate, because this is something that I immediately thought of when I see frequent eye blinking. I believe that if you see the patient doing anything faster, or if something is moving quicker than it should, such as their brain, such as their thinking capacities, their speaking, their eyes, they're quick to being reactive or disruptive, their inability to calm down, hyper attentive, but they're hyper attentive the wrong way. They're kind of chaotic in their attention span, and they have to constantly be moving. So, and headaches as well. Headaches is also excitation commonly. So MSG, right? We know MSG is added to foods to do what? Is to cause an excessive firing of the taste buds. So if you get an excessive firing in the taste buds, it's going to make the food taste even better. I don't know the exact mechanism there with MSG, but I do know it's an excitation of the brain to enhance taste of food, which is why it's so liberally used. That's also why we get such headaches, because it causes overexcitement of something that shouldn't be overexcited. So some things that we need to know about glutamate, if you don't know already, it is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It's numero uno. It's the number one guy in the brain. It's stored in vesicles. It's not always made. So it's made, and then when a bunch of stuff is made, and then it can get stored, which is conserving for the body, right? So if you're cooking and you don't have time to cook the rest of the week, you can cook a big batch of chili rather than cook just one little small pot. That takes too much energy. It actually takes a lot of energy of your stove, but also you, and excess in the dish and cleaning up the kitchen as well. But if you cook a big pot, you cook it once, and your dishes are washed once, and you can eat it for a few days and give it to a lot of people. So there's conservation of energy here, which is why it's stored. And also you need it, it needs to be called upon very quickly. So if you need glutamate, then the body can quickly provide it, not have to make it. So if it's stored in vesicles, what causes it to be released? And this is important because there are certain things that, I mean, obviously you want glutamate to be released, but if there's an excessive amount released and it's overstimulated, that's a problem. So NMDA can be overstimulating for glutamate and release it. Calcium, high levels of calcium is a problem. Low levels of magnesium is a problem. Reactive oxygen species is another one. And I left a comma. I did not have time to keep going, but there's a ton of things which can trigger glutamate release. And I've actually made a note, actually a mental note. I'm going to make a physical note right now. I'm going to make a glutamate planner because it's such a big hitter in clinic that we need to be able to see how glutamate is made, how it's stored, how it's released, how it's carried, and how it's metabolized from the body, and what also contributes to it. I mean, dietary things, drugs, meds, and so on. And what genes process it. So GAD and GDH are two big hitters for metabolizing glutamate. I don't have any knowledge about transport and storage of glutamate. I'm not there yet. I want to be, but haven't had enough time to get into it. I do know that sulfites slow the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme, which is extremely important in the brain. So we need to make sure that we're not consuming too much sulfites. And sulfites are also endogenously produced by our body as well. So ammonia. Ammonia can burden the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme, which I'll show you. And I'll also show you the MDA stimulation a bit and what that does. And then elevated homocysteine contributes to glutamate. And I think the elevated glutamate homocysteine, I forgot the mechanism, but elevated homocysteine increases asymmetric dimethylarginine, possibly, if the methylation is not up to speed. And if that happens, then you're going to get inflammation, and that inflammation is going to cause NMDA stimulation, and it's going to cause glutamate being released from the vesicles. So that is recorded. You can hear that again, and I'll also show you on the pathway planner here shortly. So basically, since I don't have a big, beautiful pathway planner to show you, that glutamate is the substrate. It goes into the GAD gene. So glutamate feeds into the GAD gene, and out comes GABA. So glutamate is the primary excitatory neurotransmitter that is metabolized and transformed by the GAD enzyme. GLAD, that's actually pretty cool. By the GLAD enzyme, we'll say, into GABA. which is the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. And taurine is a big one, and so is glycine. But GABA is the biggest one, I believe. I could be wrong, but from the last time I looked, GABA is the big player. And to make GAD work, so to make the GAD enzyme work, and to take somebody who's angry into being glad by making GABA, you need B6. And vitamin B6 in the form of pyridoxal 5-phosphate is preferred over pyridoxine hydrochloride. Pyridoxine hydrochloride can work for many patients. If you're not seeing success with pyridoxine hydrochloride, which is the common form of vitamin B6, then you need to be seriously considering pyridoxal 5-phosphate, which is known as P5P, which is readily available. So let's get into the pathways. And I'm just going to be speaking and walking through these things so you can follow along here. So now, homocysteine, this is a version 3. This has been updated. I want to make this a bit bigger. I'm afraid to make it bigger, but I'm going to try it. Okay. So here's your homocysteine. If homocysteine elevates, it's going to cause some problems. And you can get homocysteine elevation through a deficiency of vitamin B12 and methylfolate, or an MTR-MTRR problem. Again, this pathway is old and needs to be updated. And I have an updated one, I just put the wrong one. My apologies. So this is the MTR enzyme. You can remove that R right there. You can scratch it out mentally. If you print this out later, and you will have access to this in the Learning Center as well. So all these slides you'll have access to in the Learning Center, and you can cross that MTR out, or you can just look at your other pathway planner, which is accurate. So B12 deficiency, methylfolate deficiency obviously contribute to potentially elevated homocysteine. So does vitamin B6 again here. So if you run a homocysteine, which is very commonly done and easy to do, if elevated homocysteine is present in your patient with frequent eye blinking, that's something to be cognizant about and saying, okay, we're definitely have some issues here. We need to work on that. But it might not be the first thing to do. And I will show you what I did, which I made frequent eye blinking stop literally in about 15 to 20 minutes. I didn't time it, but it was extremely rapid. So just remember homocysteine here, because I'm going to show you where this plays. In fact, I'm going to do it right now. I skipped a slide. We'll get back to that one. So here is homocysteine. HCY is an abbreviation for homocysteine. And homocysteine inhibits this enzyme. And I forget the name of it, but it doesn't matter. All these bubbles are genes. So hopefully you guys know that. So all these bubbles here are genes. The black is the substrate or the end product. The green are the cofactors. The orange are things which speed up the gene. The purple are the things which slow it down. So if you look here, homocysteine slows this enzyme down, and then it increases ADMA, and ADMA elevation causes problems. And increased ADMA, I'm quite certain, but not positive because I didn't have enough time to look it up. I had problems on my computer. I couldn't access my research database, which is a huge problem for me. But asymmetric dimethylarginine is methylated arginine. So methylated arginine makes ADMA, and if you have elevated homocysteine, you can't get rid of it. You can only eliminate 20% of it through the urine, and you need to metabolize it. If you don't, you can get cardiovascular problems, and you can get neurological problems from it. It's nasty. ADMA is nasty. You can test for it. It's very expensive. I'm not certain if you can test for dimethylamine. I'm not positive on that. I haven't looked it up. But if you do order ADMA, it's expensive. So I don't really recommend it. I just be looking at homocysteine, and I'd be looking at the methylation status. So if homocysteine is high and methionine is low and B6 or B12 is low and methylfolate are low, that can obviously be easy to spot. Vitamin B6 also you can check with organic acids, zinc also. And riboflavin and niacin also can be organic acids. And don't forget here, all these different players can slow this enzyme from working. So nitric oxide, lead, mercury, hydrogen peroxide, which can be neutralized from what? Glutathione. That's right. And acetaldehyde comes from metabolism of alcohol and yeast overgrowth. And nitrous oxide comes from the dentist, or now, unfortunately, in the pregnancy ward, where labor ward, I should say, at the hospitals. So now OBs are giving nitrous oxide to women who are delivering babies to reduce the anxiety, but that is obviously the wrong thing to do. Poor neonate is being exposed, and if the woman is low in cobalamin and methylfolate, and since pregnancy is such a high demand in methylation, I believe that nitrous oxide is going to be doing a serious disservice to her. So remember I talked also about that glutamate is metabolized by GAD and GDH, glutamate dehydrogenase, and that ammonia burdens the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. Okay, so if ammonia burdens the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme, what does that look like? Here's your glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. Here's your ammonia. Ammonia in the brain is metabolized by this enzyme right here. So if you get ammonia in your brain, and you do, primarily though, it is metabolized by the mitochondria, liver mitochondria. So primarily you should know that the mitochondria metabolize ammonia via the liver through all these different steps. Okay? Now, if the liver is not working very well in the individual because of poor methylation, remember 85% of all methylation reactions occur in the liver. A lot of our patients are burdened. They're eating the wrong food. They're on meds. Their genetics are not favorable for detoxification. They're under tremendous amounts of stress. And all these things are contributing to liver burden. So supporting the liver in your patient is absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. And so is supporting their mitochondria, which is what we talked about in ChiCon 15 quite a bit. So ammonia, if the metabolized through this route, but if either this route is slowed for various reasons, or the mitochondria aren't working very well for various reasons, called chronic fatigue syndrome, the cell danger response, as we discussed in ChiCon 15, then ammonia does not get metabolized by the liver via the mitochondrial enzymes, which is this one right here, but instead it remains in circulation. And since it remains in circulation, it gets into the brain and it gets metabolized by this gene, which requires what? ATP. It requires ATP. So it's a big problem. So if somebody has chronic fatigue or they have mitochondrial dysfunction and they're having liver dysfunction, or they're eating a high protein diet such as the GAPS or paleo, and they don't feel well, it could be a number of reasons, but one could be that their liver isn't functioning well because they're burdening it, the mitochondria are not doing well, and the ammonia is elevated, and their mitochondria aren't doing well. So, and look what happens with this enzyme, this gene right here. It's located in the brain, and it takes the glutamate, and it processes the glutamine. So I will be showing you here shortly why that's important. But this enzyme right here, glutamate dehydrogenase, is key in the brain. It's absolutely critical. So glutamate dehydrogenase will produce glutamate. It will take glutamate and it will also kick it out into alpha-ketoglutarate. I need to redo that diagram. I need to draw that. I don't like how that's written. Is that version 3? Yeah, maybe I did it better on version 4. So I'm going to say GDH, improve layout. I don't like that. Okay, but look what inhibits the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme. Sulfites, a certain fatty acid, ATP, which is interesting, and I don't know if I put that one, ECGC, I think it is, but I always screw that one up. But basically green tea extract. Green tea extract. Now, I'm not saying to avoid green tea extract. I'm just saying it could slow it, and the amount needed to slow it down can be quite significant. I don't remember the source of where I got that, but I do know it does slow it down, but to what extent, I'm not sure. So if someone takes green tea extract, it might lead to some headaches. It might lead to some insomnia, irritability. So if you're giving someone green tea extract in high doses, just keep in mind that that could be possibly some of the reasons that you're seeing your patient respond unfavorably to it. But leucine promotes it. So leucine does support glutamate dehydrogenase. And I just recently saw an article that I wanted to get in my slides, but I didn't because I wanted to read another one. But it said exercise helps reduce glutamate levels. And that makes sense by looking here at glutamate dehydrogenase. Because as you exercise, you are burning your ATP. As you burn your ATP, you are producing ADP. As you create ADP and you reduce your ATP, you're promoting the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme to work. And that actually kind of makes sense that that's happening because glutamate feeds into the glutamate dehydrogenase enzyme, which produces alpha ketoglutarate, which feeds into the Krebs cycle as a substrate for the Krebs cycle to help generate ATP. So that's actually pretty cool how the body works. And then note the cofactors, vitamin B1 and vitamin B6. So thiamine and P5P are needed. I hope that is making sense to you guys, and I hope this is useful. Is it useful? You guys getting it? You can comment in the question box. Anybody have any questions before we keep going? Is everybody asleep? All right, Nigel, you need to rewatch. Yeah, I'm talking a bit fast, but yeah, you definitely can rewatch. It is being recorded, so that's good. So just double check it's being recorded. Yes, it is being recorded. Good. Okay. So this is a lot. There's a lot of biochemistry. The beautiful thing is this is recorded and you can just re-listen. And you can also, when you're looking at these pathways, just follow them step by step. Look at the ammonia, look at the glutamate, see where it goes here and where it comes from and where it goes. Look at how the genes are controlled. Look at the ammonia also comes in here, is actually produced off of this. And then what is helping metabolize it. So just look at the one certain area. So if you remember, when you get an x-ray, you don't look at the entire x-ray. Maybe you just quickly look at the whole thing, but you have to scan it, right? You've got to go left to right, and then you got to go up and down, right? So you have a technique to look at radiographs, and it's the same thing with the pathway planner. You just follow it. Just follow it. It's that simple. So now let's get to another big aspect here. So glutamate, we know, is excitation, okay? Frequent eye blinking, to me, is an overstimulation, right? It's an overstimulation of a normal action that's done by that person. So if the normal action is heightened, I think heightened brain activity. It's that simple. I really think it's that simple. Headache could be heightened brain activity. Insomnia could be heightened brain activity because their brain won't turn off. Attention deficit is too low of brain activity, and their dopamine and their glutamate can be too low, so that we need to boost it and support it. Then we have people who are just chronically tired all the time and fatigued and depressed. That's also the opposite. I remember there was one lady I worked with, and she was complaining of insomnia, and I tried teaching her my pulse method. And the pulse method is basically to supplement when you need it, and don't supplement when you don't need it, because the supplement is to enhance or add to something, right? It's to optimize a function. So if your function is working just fine, you're done. So if you sharpen your pencil and it's sharp, but you keep sharpening it, there's no point. There's no point in all. You're just going to grind all the way through your pencil and you're going to have nothing left. Or you're going to make it so sharp that as soon as you touch it on your paper, it's going to break. So excessive amounts of supplementation is a big problem. And yes, I own a supplement company, but you know, the reason I own a supplement company is because I need an outlet for my research, and I need people to use them properly, because if they're used improperly, they're going to do more harm than good. And when you work with your patients, you need to teach them the function of the nutrient or the product that you are giving them. Look, you can't sleep, you take this. You're tired, you take this. You're not tired, you don't take it. You don't take it. You're stressed out, you take this. If you're not stressed out, you don't take it. So they save money and they can start taking care of themselves a little bit. So docere, doctor, right? We're teachers. So to get on this point here, glutamate is excitatory, and it is metabolized by vitamin B6, and we also know its glutamate is released by NMDA. Here's your NMDA right here. Okay? Remember, we talked about that earlier. So glutamate is stored in vesicles, and the vesicles will release glutamate upon NMDA excitation. So quinolinic acid is an excitotoxin. Now follow the arrows. Okay, here's the NMDA. Let's follow the arrows back. Let's just keep going. Let's go all the way up here. IDO1 is the gene which controls the production. This is a very rudimentary diagram. I left a lot of steps because I didn't want to burden you guys. This is already complicated enough, and we don't need to get into full details. But NMDA is an excitotoxin. Well, it creates an excitation. That's what I should say. The body has it for a reason, so it's useful, but only short term. So NMDA is produced by an upstream, many steps above, by this enzyme called IDO1. Now, look at this. What makes it go faster? Inflammation, infection, stress. Inflammation, infection, and stress makes it go faster. Whoa, okay. So if we have inflammation in a patient, or they're stressed out, or they have an infection, a bacterial infection, then they are possibly increasing the NMDA production, which is then increasing glutamate release, which is making them more angry, or possibly contributing to their headaches or insomnia, which is further contributing to their stress, which is further depleting their cortisol, which is further causing their ability to fight infection to go down, which is causing even more inflammation. So this is a really nasty circle. This is a horrible circle to get your patient in. So what do you have to do? You got to find the source of inflammation and the infections and the stressors. And it could be a poor relationship. It could be a new environment that's stressing the person out. It could be that they're not sleeping, they're not eating right. So I would focus on the stress. And I've talked about this before at ShyCon 15. I really emphasize the point about taking a vacation, and I'm not kidding about that. So if you guys were there, you saw me come out in Hawaiian t-shirt and shorts and barefoot. And was very serious, am very serious that stress is something that you need to really focus on, primarily first with your patient. So if they're stressed out, they're going to be tired, and there's susceptible to infection and a lot of other things downstream. So NMDA increases glutamate, because that's what we're talking about right now. We're talking about excitation, because frequent eye blinking is excitation. It can be excitation. Remember, it's not always, but it's mainly, I believe, because they say that the primary diagnosis is habitual eye blinking, but it's not. Nobody is going to be creating a habit of eye blinking for fun. It's caused with neurotransmission, which then you need to look upstream. So keep following this. NMDA, it's sped up. Its NMDA levels increase through this gene, which is triggered by inflammation, infection, stress, but it's slowed by being calm and a calm immune system. Okay? So if the person is relaxed, you slow this enzyme. Again, the important use of adaptogens and calming the immune system. Now, if there are infections, you can't just go out there and start taking tanks and blasting the infection in your patient. There's a lot of prep work that needs to be done. You need to support the liver. You need to reduce their stress. There's adaptogens that need to be done. At ShyCon 16, you're going to learn through with Dan Kalish how he treats H. pylori, and he doesn't just blast it. He doesn't blast it at all. Primarily, well, you'll see. It's going to be a fantastic lecture. So I'm excited for that. So you want to reduce an MDA so you can reduce the glutamate excitation, and you can do that by adaptogens and calming the stress down and the inflammation. Now, what happens if a person is stressed out? They're reducing their tryptophan. If they're reducing their tryptophan, they're going to want to increase their tryptophan. And where do you get your tryptophan? Mainly carbs. You get your tryptophan mainly from carbs. So what are they going to eat? They're going to eat like crap. They're going to eat sugar. And they're going to eat, well, other carbohydrates. And that will be a vicious cycle because now their blood sugar is going to go up and down, which will lead to further stress, which is going to further deplete their tryptophan into this excitation area. So this can be a bit overwhelming to you guys, but it's, again, just follow it and re-listen to it. I've been telling this many, many times. And so as you walk yourself through it, you'll get it. Sorry, I'm going to probably screw up your name. Elisma, sorry. If you write it phonetically, I'll be better. You're asking a question. I've seen some people feel worse on B6, even though the indications are there. Could this be due to low glutamate, alpha ketoglutarate then, as B6 will shunt glutamate towards GABA? That's good thinking, but remember, vitamin B6 does, I don't know how many different genes in the body. You know, there's a whole bunch. We're also talking about converting 5-HTP to serotonin. We're talking about, DOPA going to dopamine. We're talking about homocysteine going through the transsulfuration pathway. There's a lot of things where vitamin B6 is utilized. So if people feel worse on it, I don't know. I'd have to know what that worse is. It would have to be evaluated. But also keep in mind that if they feel worse and you give a vitamin B6, let's just walk through this real quickly, and that might also help answer your question. So think of downstream effects. So if you give a particular nutrient and you support a particular thing, let's go back to what you're talking about here. If you give vitamin B6 and you're shunting glutamate away from glutamine and you're producing alpha ketoglutarate, there could be some feedback inhibition there, but the body is controlling that, so I don't know how that would work. And vitamin B6 over here is supporting homocysteine conversion to cystathionine. I didn't show the whole transsulfuration pathway, but downstream through here, vitamin B6 is needed through the transsulfuration pathway a lot. And you could have a downstream blockage. So look at your transsulfuration pathway. I'm looking at it over here now. I have one of my sitting on my treadmill of all places. Shows you how much I use the treadmill. So vitamin B6, it will cruise on down, and I'm looking at the transsulfuration pathway now, and it will, it could be sulfite increase, possibly you need some molybdenum in there, decreased sulfur load. It could be a myriad of reasons. It's hard to say. Feeling more tired. Yes. Okay, great. Yeah, if people are feeling more tired, look, so you've got, this is a sad diagram, but you got glutamate going to GABA, so that'll make him feel more tired. So GABA is inhibitory, glutamate is excitation. Okay, so they're going to definitely feel more tired. You come over here, your vitamin B6 is going to take 5-HTP to make serotonin. Serotonin is the happy compound, but also you look over here, vitamin B6 will also make dopamine. So it's hard to say. They could have some other issues as well, but maybe lower the B6, or maybe they need more tyrosine. Maybe I'd evaluate their protein intake. So if their protein intake is too low, maybe they need more. You can do the 0.8 grams protein per, 2.2 pounds of body weight, or 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram, or you can simplify it and say 1 gram of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight and just keep it simple. So just do that quick formula. Is their BMI adequate? Are they absorbing protein? They might be eating it, but are they chewing it and absorbing it? Are they on acids? Are they eating and stressed out? Are they driving and stressed out? So these things need to be evaluated. Are their adrenals tanked? So on. So just troubleshoot it. And the two first things, well, there's a myriad of things I work on first, but the sub foundations, as we talked about at ShyCon 15, I always work on the foundations first. But fatigue is a big one. If your patients are tired, I always and there's an energy webinar in the Learning Center. So if you haven't heard that one, listen to that, because that can really help out your patient who gets tired from B6. Maybe their adrenals are tanked. Maybe their mitochondria are not doing very well. So listen to that energy webinar at seekingout.org in the Learning Center. That can be very useful for you and your patient. So the things I like to really hit first with my patients in the first office call is making sure their adrenals are supported with the adrenal cortex, typically giving them adaptogens. If you just give them adrenal cortex, but you're not supporting their adaptogens, which blunt the response to stress, then they're going to get more stressed out through the adrenal cortex, and that's not useful. If you notice they get too high strung on the adrenal cortex, don't give them that. Just give them the adaptogens first, and then you can support them with adrenal cortex after. I also give electrolytes. We need electrolytes to move magnesium into the cell. Magnesium isn't moving into the cell, then we're going to have a lot of calcium problems and chloride and other electrolyte imbalances. So electrolytes are a big one that I always like to hit first too. I give everybody electrolytes off the bat. I think most people are electrolyte deficient, especially if they're adrenally fatigued. If they're adrenally fatigued, they typically have frequent urination and they're pissing out even more electrolytes. But let's get back to this glutamate thing, because that's what we're supposed to be talking about. But that's a great question. So to sum this slide up, NMDA, excitatory, it's sped up by stress, inflammation, and infection. And look what feedback inhibits it. NAD. NAD is produced by many things, and also utilization of energy. So exercise will also produce NAD, but NAD, this is the area in the body that produces niacin, basically. So NAD is the body's niacin, the active niacin. So how many of you know Abram Hoffer's work, Orthomolecular Medicine Institute? Fantastic. It's great. And he's a huge niacin proponent. I mean, Abram is just nuts about niacin. So niacin can feedback and inhibit this enzyme. So if you can't work with the stress or the infection and the inflammation in your patient, but they have excitotoxicity, maybe they have frequent eye blinking, maybe they have headaches, maybe they're irritable quickly, they're quick to react, they're slow to calm down. You give niacin, boom. And what do I always talk about with methylfolate? What's the primary antidote for methylfolate side effects? Niacin 50 milligrams every 30 minutes. Bang, it works like magic. It is phenomenal. So you stop the production of the quinolinic acid by stopping this enzyme from working. I shouldn't say stopping, I should say slowing. Okay, so niacin, you'll be seeing that here soon. Okay, So that's why I wanted to show you here. Okay, so let's get to the case study. All right. This little stinker right here, who's the redhead is getting all over him. Okay, he's trying to prevent it from goal being scored, but he has nothing to do with it. He's trying to push him back, and he gets the ball off his foot. Okay, and into the goal. And this little stinker is my son. This is Theodore. Okay, and I coach him for many years, and he's a fantastic little boy. But he can be trouble, and I'm very thankful he's under our roof, because if he wasn't under our roof, he would be autistic, absolutely no doubt, and he would be a very unhappy kid, and he would be at the teacher's principal's office constantly. Okay, so here he is, aggressive, and he's the youngest of three boys, so he learns how to fight. Here he is after. He's got the fist clenched. He's all telling himself, yeah, he's all tough. But I show you this picture, partly because I'm a proud dad. My kid scored a goal, but also to show you that this kid, I mean, he fights. He's a fighter, okay? He doesn't let people push him around. And that is just his mentality, and he's going to go for it. And you need excitation to do that, right? If you're just a kind of blah person, you'd let this redhead kid named Gus, who's also a great athlete, get all over you and push you away, and you'd say, all right, you just walk away. But you wouldn't get the goal, okay? It wouldn't happen. So I show you that because it's showing his personality. He gets in a situation, an environment, he's going to go for it. So Theodore, he has increased susceptibility to frequent eye blinking. Absolutely. So he has countless GAD polymorphisms, GAD1 and 2. He has multiple homozygous red, which slows the ability to process glutamate from the GAD enzyme into GABA. Okay, so remember, GAD processes glutamate, excitatory neurotransmitter, along with vitamin B6 into GABA. All right. So when that happens, when the polymorphisms are found, then the ability to transform glutamate into GABA is slowed down. So that means that glutamate levels are potentially higher. I'm saying potentially, not always, potentially. And the GABA levels are potentially lower. Okay. Now his MAO enzyme is also slowed. And this is an X-linked enzyme, X-linked gene. So it's one copy in boys. So since it's slowed, let me show you where MAO is located. MAO is located here on the pathway planner, and here, and here. It's also located in the histamine pathway, which I didn't load. So histamine is also excitatory, and so is norepinephrine, and so is dopamine. So this kid, he can't process glutamate into GABA very quickly, and he cannot eliminate dopamine or norepinephrine or epinephrine very quickly, nor serotonin, nor histamine. Most of these are excitatory. So this kid's ability to pay attention and have a ton of energy is extremely high. Now, he also has MTHFR. So he's homozygous in this, so his methylation is potentially slowed, okay, because he can't make the methylfolate. Here's MTHFR here. He's not making that much methylfolate, but if he's eating his leafy greens, he's fine, right? Because MTHFR produces methylfolate, and you also get methylfolate from your leafy vegetables, leafy greens. Folate comes from the word foliage, green stuff, okay? So when this level is too low, then he cannot be producing too much SAMe. Now let's go over here. So we know his MAO is slow, so his norepinephrine levels are potentially higher, and along with his dopamine levels. Now he also has MTHFR. It's about 40% slowed if he's not eating his green leafy vegetables or supplementing with his methylfolate. Now his ability to produce SAMe is also lower. So now his dopamine and norepinephrine are really stuck because you need SAMe here to also clear the norepinephrine. Are you following me? So this kid's potential to be irritable, pissed off, hyper excited, aggressive, and frequent eye blinking is through the roof. It's there. And it happened. So we had a major environmental shift. He never had this until this winter. He never had frequent eye blinking that I had noticed. And it was so bad that I wondered how he even functioned, to be honest. His eyes were mostly closed. It was horrible to see. And I researched a lot of things, and there was nothing, as you saw earlier. We had environmental changes. We moved to a new home, a new school, new teacher, and new friends. And this kid, he's a homebody. He likes his friends. He doesn't want people leaving, and he likes his same situation. He does not like staying in hotels. He likes what he's used to. And then remember, when you get stressed out, what are you going to do? When you're stressed out, your tryptophan levels drop. As your tryptophan levels drop and your serotonin levels drop, you're going to go towards sugar. You're going to go for it. And that's what he did. Okay. So he was sneaking sugar because he felt better from it. It gave him a happier mood, but only short term, because then his adrenals crashed because his blood sugar imbalanced, because he would get pissed off. He was forgetting supplements along with his mom also, and myself. He was eating poorly because he's eating the sugar. When you eat the sugar, you don't desire the protein. It's a vicious cycle. And then his sleep time became irregular because he just wasn't sleeping well. And there was yelling in the home because he was being a punk. He was, and then in turn being yelled at. His brothers would get mad at him, then him bugging them. So they would yell. So it was this horrible circle. And then his older brother, God, I get so mad sometimes. He was saying, I don't have any problems with cheese. Dairy cheese is fine. And he somehow convinced his mom to get cheese in the house. And I was totally against it, but I was like, all right, we'll let it happen. And then it got to Theo. So then Theo says, Dad, I don't have any problems either. Well, I said, all right, we'll try it. So he was on cheese. He moved, genetically susceptible. He was irritable all the time, and he wasn't eating right, and he wasn't sleeping right. So we have a perfect storm. Notice I'm not blaming all this on genetics, okay? We're not blaming all this on genetics. It's environment and lifestyle and diet too, right? It's all together. So he started blinking, and I saw it, blinking more and more, and I was like, that's bad. Maybe it'll go away. Then it just became horrible. And his brothers were actually not yelling, but they were being rude to him to cut it out. And then he became even more self-conscious about it. Again, the vicious loop. We went on vacation. I was like, if we go on vacation, it might happen. We went to Kauai, a very relaxing place. We all got along for the most part. It was a great trip. But, this was at the first timeshare we were, and he was still blinking badly. And I was like, God, he's having fun, different environment. He's eating better. We're sleeping better. It's still bad. I said, all right, I got to intervene here. So I looked at him. Sorry. I looked at him and I said, Theo, are your eyes bugging you? He's like, no. I said, do you know that you're doing it? No, not really. It's like, God, that's unbelievable. Because the kid was just blinking like a hummingbird flies. So he had carb addiction. He was avoiding the protein. And I want to show you why protein avoidance is potentially part of it. A protein avoidance, obviously, because he's eating the sugar, right? But ammonia, right? All protein is nitrogen containing. Nitrogen containing produces ammonia. Ammonia burdens the liver, and as it's burdening the liver, it also gets into the brain, which causes even more glutamate. So he might have been telling me, say, Dad, I don't want to eat that much protein because it's going to increase my ammonia and I can't process the ammonia very well. So that is something you got to evaluate. You can't just be pushing GAPS diets or paleo diets on people if they don't want to do that. It's important to evaluate how people are feeling, and you can't push it on them. So obviously you have to know if they're manipulating you or not. But you can also check glutamine levels. If glutamine levels are high, that's a sign of high ammonia in the brain. So he was very quick to anger, and he would go and he would hide behind a couch to calm down. And of course, his brothers would yell at him to get out of there, and I would tell him to back off and let him calm down. You give the kid space, he calms down quite well. So my treatment thoughts were, gosh, the kid's genes are susceptible. I pretty much have his major gene polymorphism memorized. Um, I was thinking glutamate because he was blinking his eyes all the time, and he's playing video games because we have video games in the rainy season here in Seattle, and it's pretty rainy here. But once the sun comes out, they've got another probably month to have TV and video games in our house, and after that, there is no TV or video games for about 8 months of the year here. So he had video games during this time. There was yelling in the home. He was having dairy, and he had a regular sleep pattern. And I was thinking he had increased MDA activity as well because he wasn't getting his vitamins. There were fish oils and oxidative stress. He had higher calcium magnesium ratios. I'm thinking of all these different things. Wi-Fi. Older brother was turning that on and off until I figured out that. And I keep Wi-Fi off in our home, but he figured out the password. So I've since changed it. The Wi-Fi is off again. This is a really good article on MAO enzyme. So the link is here. You just type in Beyond MTHFR MAO, and this article will pop up. It's a good one. And and when I talk about, let me go back. I was too fast on this one. So I said MAO-T. So it's a G. So MAO, there's a G base and there's a T base. If the MAO in your patient is G, it's normal. It's working, and it's processing what it needs to. If it's T, if it's found out to be T, it's slowed down. Okay, so just think G as green, go, it's working. T is slow. So just remember MAO, if it's G, it's slowed down. And this is the RS, I forget the RSID, but it's in that article. You can read it. This article here. He explains it very beautifully. So let's get into mechanisms. Okay. Epilepsy, GAD enzyme, antibodies against the GAD enzyme. If you have antibodies against the GAD enzyme, you have higher glutamate. If you have higher glutamate, you get epileptic seizures. Based upon this report, let's see right here. Here we go. Sorry. But anyway, there's elevated GAD antibodies. Okay, since there's antibodies against the GAD enzyme, vitamin B6 can't bind, and if it can't bind, the glutamate is staying high, and the glutamate can't turn into GABA. Okay, because antibodies are binding to the receptor. If the antibodies are binding to the receptor, glutamate levels are higher. Glutamate levels are higher due to the antibodies. Then, if they're really high, then you're going to get a seizure. So they're saying that they blunted this issue by giving immunotherapy, and it caused an improvement. Okay. So Tourette syndrome. If you guys ever seen Tourette syndrome, it's sad and funny. I had a history professor, a medieval history professor at the University of Washington with Tourette syndrome. And man, he would get really excited. As soon as he started talking about knights fighting and wars, he would start whooping. That's what he would do. He would whoop. So this is also an imbalance between glutamate and GABA. So again, excitation. So increased glutamate levels and increased homocysteine levels in autistic children, and you have decreased glutamine. Remember, a glutamate dehydrogenase converts glutamate to glutamine. Okay, so and then you've got homocysteine messing with that process as well. So these are also elevated. So I just looking at some papers. I also looked at the mechanism of actually eye blinking, and the mechanism of eye blinking is triggered by calcium and glutamate. And I tried getting the diagram here for you guys, but it was just it was too complicated and wasn't necessary. So what did I do? So I was in Hawaii. I didn't have my whole dispensary here, and when I say whole dispensary, I have literally 4 drawers of a whole bunch of a variety of different supplements, and it's my hospital. I mean, those drawers is my hospital. So we brought a few things with us. We have a few essentials that we always take with us, and so I said, okay, I'm going to give you magnesium to help blunt the calcium. I didn't tell him this, I'm telling myself this. And I said, I got to give him cofactor of B6 to move the glutamate through. And then my wife goes, well, what about niacin too? I say, absolutely, thank you. So I gave him the capsule of magnesium and vitamin B6, and note the active form. I gave him magnesium glycinate. Glycine is also an inhibitory neurotransmitter. And I gave him malate too, and the magnesium malate, which is mitochondrial support. And so that's useful. And then I gave him a niacin lozenge. And niacin lozenge, it's very, very small, so it's easy for him to swallow it. And I said, do not chew it and do not suck on it because I didn't want him to flush. And the niacin I like to use is nicotinic acid because the research I've found is nicotinic acid makes NAD faster in the body. And remember what NAD does. NAD feedbacks, inhibits this enzyme, which slows NMDA, which then slows the glutamate release. So not only was I working on metabolizing the glutamate to GABA, but I was also working on inhibiting the release of it. Okay, so I gave him both of these things. Seriously, 20 minutes, he stopped and he returned to normal blinking. Now, placebo, I didn't say, here, take these and your eye blinking will go away. I just said, here, Theo, take this. He's like, okay. Okay. I didn't prime him. So if you see this in your clinic and there's nothing in your patient's eyes, there's no dry eye issues, there's no, sores in their eyes, there's no styes, there's, you've done all that. I would be looking at these three nutrients: niacin, magnesium glycinate mixed with malate, and pyridoxal 5-phosphate. Now, he's 7 years old, and I gave him these dosages. I'm comfortable with that. And it works. So that's Magnesium Plus. I gave him a capsule of that because that's what I had. And then that's by Seeking Health, which is, disclosure, is my company. And then, so within 20 minutes, that was it. And he hasn't had it since. It was gone. So sustained treatment, obviously we got to keep working on him, right? This is not just a one-time thing here. So proper sleep cycle, we reduced the yelling in the home. Since he felt better, the yelling started reducing. Since I was on vacation, I was around to really get the kids back on track. So I was working with that. I made sure he got adaptogens to keep him on point. We weren't using adaptogens for a long time. I try not to over supplement at all. I used to just give multivitamins to my kids, but now everybody's getting adaptogens. And we removed dairy. He's done. Dairy's out of this house completely. There is no more bending my ear or my wife's ear on that. So it's out of the house. So reduce gaming and TV because those are excitatory as well. And I've been supporting him a lot more with school and his school homework, which is great. He's a little slower to learn than his brothers, but I don't know why that is. But once he gets it, he's solid and he's excelling in school. So I just make sure. I don't know if his teachers suck. I don't know, but we're working a lot more together now, which is a lot more fun. And he's exercising more too. Back in the winter, he wasn't exercising much. So I've already talked about this. It's already done. This is what I do for him, long-term maintenance. I should also stay here. I also do this. I rotate him. So I give him either the Kids Optimal Multi 2 times a week and the Optimal Start 2 times a week, and then I will skip a day where they don't get any vitamins at all. I'll just give them a rest. The reason I give them Optimal Start is because it has no methylfolate and no methylcobalamin in it. And that can be useful because those 2 nutrients can be overstimulating for some people. I don't know all the mechanisms behind it, but that's what I do. And I give them fish oil and the Optimal Adrenal. It's our adaptogen formula. I'm a lot more supportive now. I used to be like my parents, where if there's something wrong, you fix it, and if they're doing something right, you just take it for granted. So now I'm shifting that. I'm just a lot more supportive, which has been fantastic. And a side note on that, so there's a book written. I just bought it actually, and I haven't read it, but there's these two bachelor guys who graduated from school, and they decided to do a survey of people who have been married for 40 years or longer and happy. So this is a total side note, but frequent eye blinking is stress, right? And yelling in the home and everything else. So this is not necessarily a side note, so I'll go back and support that. But what they found out is the people who have been married for 40 years plus happily, there was one thing that he found in common. And that one thing he found in common was that there was a 5-to-1 ratio. And that 5-to-1 ratio was, they said 5 positive things, nice things like I love you or great work or thanks for dinner or whatever, thanks for helping me out, to 1 bad thing. Why didn't you do that? The dishes are dirty. My shirt's ruined. You're late. So 5 positive things to 1 negative thing. So think about that with all your relationships and all your patients' relationships. Ask them, do you have a 5-to-1 ratio? And they kind of look at you and say, hey, I want a 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. If you're having a crappy day, you need to do 5 positive things for every crappy thing that happened to you that day. And I don't care how hard it is, but make it happen. So it's very simple. You say something negative and you just like, man, I got to say 5 things positive. I got to do 5 positive things. And it's a very simple thing. So that's great. Take that to heart. And I think it's a great tip. And it's constantly improving. There's no ceiling on improvement. So just keep improving all the time. I recently just came back from a high performance conference where I learned these things. So sometimes common sense is a common practice. So, that's a common thing said by Brendan Burchard. So he's doing more activities now. He's doing soccer. In fact, he just came back from soccer and then he went straight to piano. So he's busy. And this is a little stinker when he's happy. And thankfully, he's a happy, very healthy kid. And so it's a pleasure to be a father and support him. So I hope that was helpful. There's a lot of biochemistry there, more than I was anticipating. But I wanted to show you that there's multiple mechanisms at play, right? We can't just assume that there's one mechanism or one gene or one vitamin or one thing you do. We always have to do it all. We have to try to reduce all the things coming into the cup. Because if you have a cup that's being filled by 10 different people and the cup is getting full and you stop one person, but 9 other people are still filling it, well, it's still going to overflow. So you got to tell all 10 people to back off so you don't make a mess. And if that cup overflows, those are symptoms. So you have to address them all. So I hope that served you guys. Was that useful? I guess you'll take the survey when you're done. We'll find out. Any last minute questions? I'm going to go hang out with my kids. All right. Yeah, I look forward to seeing you guys at ChiCon 16. It's going to be fantastic. I just got word from Judith, who's presenting, Judy, I believe, Judy or Judith, and she's presenting on vaccination, and she's extremely scientific. And she emailed me yesterday. She goes, I'm sending you the slides soon, and I'm slightly delayed because I just got out of vaccination court, and there's a great case study that I'll be presenting at ChiCon 16 about it. So as you know, at ChiCon 15, I axed the vaccination presentation for various reasons, which I don't need to get into, but I thought it would have been a disservice to you all. So I axed it, but she's got 2 presentations and she's wholly scientific. So we're all going to learn from her and I'm very excited for it. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Thanks for tuning in, and let's keep digging. Thank you. Bye-bye.